On this episode of the Stinking Albatross Podcast. She said, I've delivered over 1,000 babies, but the best part of my job is killing people.
Yeah. Fear is always a good tactic. So
for all politicians, if Trudeau thinks that it's going to help the New Brunswick Liberals to campaign, I don't think that he's fully aware of his ratings right now and his polling numbers. Yeah. So you know that they just need medication, but you still kill them instead. Today's episode is brought to you by LaRosse Media Incorporated. They make professional videos to fit any budget, so next time you need a commercial, promo, or corporate video, think LaRosse. Check them out at larossemedia.com. Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross Podcast. My name is Alissa, and I'm here once again with my partner in crime, Scott Hayward. How's it going?
Can't complain. Had a great long weekend. How about you guys?
Yeah, pretty good. Can't complain either. You had a birthday party, I understand, over the weekend?
Yes, we did start off the weekend. I, of course, missed my son's first birthday, along with my wife's birthday and Mother's Day when I was in Ontario for the National March for Life, the Toronto March for Life, and the National Prayer Breakfast. But the following week, which would have been a few days ago on Friday, we had a birthday party for my son's first birthday, which was bear themed.
Nice.
So I did smoked salmon and we had a cheesecake with a bunch of berries. And then we had a honey based gin cocktail punch. That was very, very popular in my family, along with, what did she do? My wife did like a blackberry honey glaze on top of a brie that I grilled on the barbecue. So
that sounds amazing.
It was, I don't know if my son enjoyed his birthday or not, but we did. And that's what matters.
Absolutely.
No, he did. And my daughter helped him unwrap his gifts, and he was pretty excited. There was one moment, thankfully, my sister and I think my wife captured it, but we got him like I don't know what they're called, but they're little tricycles, but they don't have pedals.
Yeah, like Strider.
Yeah, so it helps him kind of learn, and then eventually you take off the back wheels you put on, so it's just a bicycle.
Yeah.
And then they walk around on that, and then they bike sooner rather than later. And so he had his little tricycle with the Strider, I guess.
Yeah.
And he didn't quite know, and then we put him on it, and then he began to realize it's his and not his sister's, and Anastasia saying, "This is yours, Mikey, this is yours." And then he had the biggest grin on his face that we have ever seen. And his back was to me, so I didn't get to see it, but they got a picture and a video of it.
Is he walking?
No, not yet. Like he's standing, and then he holds on to things and walks a little bit, but
so
yeah, he crawls so hard, like he plays so hard, like from right when he wakes up, because his sister wakes him up at like 5:30 in the morning, right to when he goes to sleep. He is hard all the time, nonstop. Like he doesn't sit.
Yeah.
He is always working on different projects. And so we're like, okay, we're not gonna buy him like sweats anymore. We're gonna buy him denim and like coveralls and things that are going to be tough. And always his knees, because he crawls so hard, even the denim in his knees is gone. So
he's got to get that.
He's more than ready to walk and run.
Yeah, he'll be running before he walks, it sounds like.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Well, that's
what we have now, a backyard at our rental property while we wait to buy.
Yeah.
So they literally just run around in the dirt back there.
That was like when we moved to Alberta, when we moved from the townhouse to the house that we have now, the yard was my number one. And I remember just walking through the front door and going into the kitchen and seeing the yard. And all the yards in Calgary are so small, if not non-existent. And that just sold the property to me right there and then. So yards are amazing. Definitely cannot. And now you just open the door after dinner and they run outside. And we're getting a new playground that we ordered up from Costco. It's coming on Wednesday. And
nice.
It's going to be built, and they're going to climb all over it. It's like bigger and higher than the toddler one we had previously, which I sold. So I love Summers for that for sure.
Yeah, my parents just bought for his first birthday. They bought a little plate structure from Walmart, and they came and set it up while we were gone to the riverbank yesterday. And they love it. They were playing on it this morning.
Yeah.
So, and my dad's out there with them right now. So
I YouTubed how, like, because I've seen different videos of like the torture that it takes to set up these big Costco playgrounds. And so I YouTubed the one that we have, and it literally just comes in planks of wood, and you have to actually build it. Like, it's not like, oh, here's a wall, and you put like IKEA, you put this wall on this wall or
Yeah.
whatever. You have to like plank the, drill the planks and stuff. So I just looked at my husband and I'm like, I'm not doing this. So I messaged this homeschooling group and I was like, does anybody have a son or young adult that can put this together for a little bit of side money? And I got a message right away. So very grateful for that, because that, even the most experienced handyman and like man who builds things for their family all the time, the one guy said it took him 7 hours over 3 days.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a matter of capability. It's or
Yeah.
not ability. It's a matter of availability.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
yeah.
we're just gonna get this like 18-year-old teenager to come and do it, and he boasts that thinks he can do it in 3 hours. So we'll see what happens.
Give them the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really great. I too had a birthday party for my son last week. He turned 2, and it was dinosaur themed.
Do we have pictures of the cake?
Yeah. I'll get the producer Dave to post what the cake should have looked like on Pinterest and what it actually did look like, because the juxtaposition is funny. But if you look at the cake just by itself without comparing it, it didn't look too bad. So, but it was just
Good.
like one of those cupcake cakes. You know how you put cupcakes together in a shape and then you ice over it like it's a cake. So it was fun to make, and he loved it. But there was like 16 or 17 toddlers in my yard, and they have these big, huge automatic bubble guns at Costco. And you
Right.
literally pull the trigger and like 1,000 bubbles come out. So they were all chasing each other around with that, and it was good times.
That's fun. Yeah. Good for you guys. Good weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty good. And I know that you mentioned that you went to the March for Life. How was that? I too went to the March for Life in Edmonton, but I'll let you go first because you went to more
Yeah.
marches.
Yeah, yeah, I did go to more marches, so I win. I'm also not on maternity leave, so there's also that. Yeah, I made it to a big week in Ontario. So, like I said, I left my wife on the middle of her birthday on Sunday the 5th. And then I drove to Winnipeg because I had to fly early the next morning. Of course, Winnipeg to get to there's no direct to Ottawa. So it's Winnipeg, Calgary, then Calgary, Ottawa. So I land in Ottawa mid-afternoon on the Monday, go to my hotel, get ready, do a little bit of work. And then that Monday evening, they always have the night before a supper with some, kind of just mixing and mingling for the National Prayer Breakfast. So this was the very first National Prayer Breakfast I've ever been to. Um, they moved it because usually it's the end of May, and they moved it to the beginning of May, so it's the same week as the March for Life in Ottawa, the National March for Life, which was really, really helpful. So tons of people there, tons of MPs from all different kinds of political parties, lots of just kind of regular people as well. So the evening was about 800 people for the supper. And then the next day for the prayer breakfast at 7 in the morning, there were over 1,300 people there. So Richard Bragdon, who's a pro-life conservative member of parliament from New Brunswick, he is the current chair of the National Prayer Breakfast. And usually that committee does include MPs from other political parties. And under that, I believe it's a committee. I could be wrong on that. I'm pretty sure they do include people from other political parties all the time. But anyway, regardless, with Richard as chair of the National Prayer Breakfast, they've gone from like 400 people, and they usually have it from before Center Block had to be shut down a few years ago. I believe that the National Prayer Breakfast was at Center Block, but now they're off Parliament Hill, very close to it, mind you, at the Shaw Center, which is the convention center in Ottawa, in downtown Ottawa. And yeah, so over 1,300 people there. And it was a great experience for me, networking very much on the evangelical, Pentecostal side, a Protestant side, in terms of, the way that they pray their prayers and whatnot, which is fine. I like in that context, that's all in one fine. It's not my cup of tea. And Richard was joking that they had Natalie Grant, who I believe is a Grammy winner, country religious singer, and she's actually married to a Canadian. So they were kind of one of the featured guests, and she sang some songs, and he played the piano both the night before, then during the day for the prayer breakfast the following day. And of course, some of her songs are very, I'm not gonna say charismatic-y, but not far off. And for those who don't know, Richard Bragdon's a former pastor, and he got up there the night before, and he was so on fire. And I've never heard Richard like this before. He was like, it was like he was preaching from the pulpit, even though he wasn't preaching. He was just talking about the dinner and the prayer breakfast. And I thought he was gonna fly off the stage, or as people were joking, they thought Richard was gonna have an altar call, and everyone had come down. And but he restrained himself
Imagine
toward the
Trudeau
end.
just
But
like converts like on the spot to become an
yeah,
actual
exactly.
Christian.
Yeah. So it was great. It was a lot of fun. But like I said, like there's a lot of senior pastors there from different ecclesial community organizations. I saw different people from the chancery for the Archdiocese of Toronto, for example. There, I believe I saw, yeah, Father Deacon Bennett, who's a deacon within the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, and he's based in Ottawa. He was there, so. But Richard was joking that after one of the songs that Natalie did, and he was just losing himself on stage. He's like, "Yeah, I could tell," and looking out into the crowd, who amongst our friends are the Catholics and the Calvinists, right? Because it's not really our cup of tea, and whatever. That was all well and fine. But it was interesting because on for the National Prayer Breakfast, traditionally for 59 years, so this is the 59th edition. The next year is the 60th one. So Alissa, it's really great that you're going to the other Marches for Life, but maybe you can fly in for the prayer breakfast. It was also great because for people who don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alissa, you're pretty good with faces and I'm pretty good with names, but it's not vice versa. So when we're together, it's pretty solid, but when we're apart, I think it's a bit of a disaster. So anyway, it'd be good to have you along for that because this COVID-19 restrictions, they're still 2 years ago, but these are the types of events. Like there's a bunch of people I haven't seen for 5, 6, seven
Yeah.
years, and so I do need that help for that recollection. But anyway, um, for the 59 years that the National Prayer Breakfast has been going on, which is the longest parliamentary one. The Americans, of course, don't have a parliament, they have a Congress. Theirs is a little bit longer, but Canada is the second longest one in the world and continuous. They always have the prime minister and the leader of the opposition to come in and speak. And to the prime minister's credit, Justin Trudeau has not missed a national prayer breakfast once as prime minister, which is pretty impressive because the prime minister is usually pretty busy, flying here and there, wherever else. So good on the prime minister. So the prime minister had a speech, and Pierre Poilievre had a speech, and it was really interesting because I wasn't there last year, but I heard that a lot of people were kind of hooting and hollering during Pierre's speech last year. So the prime minister's speech was whatever. Like it wasn't great, it wasn't awful, it was fine. He was talking about how when he was growing up, he had his father, former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, make sure that they pray every night before they go to bed, and how that was an important part of their childhood. He didn't say that he does this, to this day, or that he gets his kids to do it. And then he talked about the Beatitudes from the Gospels, which, if you think about the Gospels and Justin Trudeau, that probably is the
Yeah.
set of verses that he's least out of line with, I guess you could say. But it was fine. But then Pierre Poilievre had a speech, and in it, he's talking about free will and how this is the ultimate gift from God, which theologically that's very problematic to begin with, and especially the way he's talking about free will. You can go see this online, by the way, because CPAC televises it live. And then he's talking about how ministers, the word minister, it's the same in the church as it is in government. And really what it means is servant, that the prime minister is the first of the servants, and that the masters are really the people who have free will that elect the members of parliament, who then constitute the ministers of the crown. And he was saying, hopefully, you, our masters, will have a new um, first of the
Did he say
servants
this
next
in
time.
front of
And
Trudeau?
my back was to the stage because there were round tables,
Yeah.
and I could see everyone else at my table who would otherwise be like fairly hardcore conservative supporters. One of them being an MP to my right, and to my left, one of them being an executive assistant to one of the longest serving conservative senators in Parliament, and everybody kind of had like a cringy face. I was just like, just can't help yourself. Like all you need to do is get up there and talk for 5 minutes about how much you love God and how much God plays a role in your life, and like that's it. So anyway, that was interesting about
So
the
did
National
did
Prayer
Trudeau
Breakfast.
hear Pierre's speech and vice versa?
Oh yeah, they were both on stage at the same
Oh,
time.
it's so
Yeah.
creepy. It's just cringy. Like it's cringy if he wasn't there, but it's especially cringy because he is, and it's so not the like place to kind of campaign. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
this isn't a rally in
Yeah,
Vancouver.
exactly. So it was a very different, apparently compared to last year. So, but regardless, I was great to go. I was grateful to go. Been meaning to go for the last number of years. I did have tickets last year, but my wife had given birth around this time, so didn't go. Had to give up the tickets,
Deep.
but yeah, it'd be great to go next year, both of us if we can. But anyways, you were asking about that. So then, of course, a couple days later on Thursday was the March for Life in Ottawa, the National March for Life, and did some media there. We had volunteers do a petition drive. We had between the National March for Life in Ottawa and the March for Life in Toronto, we had over 500 people, new people, sign our petition that we'll be presenting to the House of Commons hopefully in the early autumn. And, I would say, like, the because you, Alyssa, used to be on the planning committee for the National March for
I
Life in
was the
Ottawa, and
planning committee. I
I
was just
remember going in, like, 2012 and I wasn't there in 2015, I remember 2012, but I remember seeing videos and pictures and stuff from 2014 through 13, 14, 15, when they legitimately had, like, 25,000 people on the lawn because the both the east lawn and the west lawn in front of center block, if you look at pictures from 10 years ago, are completely covered with people. This is significantly less. I spoke to some people from Campaign Life Coalition. I thought they were kind of underestimating. They were thinking that there are about 3,500 there. I'm not a crowd estimator, so I don't know. I thought it was 5,000, but it was the largest crowd since the COVID-19 restrictions. I would say that the the last few times I've been to the National March for Life in Ottawa, it's a lot of familiar faces, not really meeting new people. This time there's a lot of new faces, a lot of young people from, private Catholic universities or colleges or high schools that kind of come up there for their own volition. They're not being bussed in from schools from Toronto and across Ottawa because they want a day off. And I understand when you were on the committee, you actually utilized that time well with them. I would argue that if that were to happen now, maybe not utilized as well. So there's a bunch of things about the National March for Life that I don't like compared to 10 years ago when you guys were there and had it to be 5 times as large. But it was good to see that there was an increase. It was good to see and meet new people, make new friends. So that was great. And then the next day, I took a train down to Toronto, and then the day after that, on the Saturday, was the Toronto March for Life, which was there were more people there in 2024 than there were in 2022. The last time I was there, of course, last year again couldn't go because my wife had just given birth. But I was told that the numbers this year was a little bit less than they were last year. But this year they had a conference attached to it that was pretty good. I attended the conference. I wasn't a speaker at it, but I did attend the conference, and there were good questions and got to meet a lot of people there. So yeah, it was a great trip. My wife forgave me before I left for missing all those important dates, but that's part of the job, and that's the sacrifice she makes, and it's a sacrifice on my part too, not to be around my family for those important dates. But yeah, how was the march up in Edmonton?
Yeah, I mean, like I remember being one of the things like planning the March for Life and all the activities surrounding it was a lot of work. But what was more work
Takes a whole
was
year, basically.
yeah, maybe 6 months or so. But what was more work for me back in the day was doing all the high school presentations leading up to it. I would do 4 presentations every single in a row, every single period in high schools, every single day for like months and months and months. It's so exhausting. And travel around to Ottawa, specifically Toronto, anywhere. And basically, I would do the presentation, and then the teachers would sign people up to go to the march after the presentation. So I would get back the feedback forms and kind of know where people stood before and after the presentation. And then those that were so moved then signed up for the march. And most of the high schools had a pro-life club as well. So, developing those relationships with those students, with the teachers, with the principals was really important. Having an effective speaker, like I think I got really good at it over the time, just out of pure practice and knowing what works and what didn't work. But it was absolutely exhausting. And it was also sort of sad. Like sometimes I would meet high school students in grade 9, who said they had an abortion in grade 8 and they had no idea what it was really until they saw my presentation. Just a lot of different sad stories like that. So also having kind of organizations that could help them and information available to them was also really important. But then, yeah, we would do a press conference on Parliament Hill, and then we would do the march, and then we would do the vigil the night before, which was always counter protested by just the most craziest people. The most crazy people, they would just scream and shout as loud as they could over the praying, because it's not like a rally where you can kind of drown them out.
Yeah.
You're praying and it's more quiet that way. And then, yeah, you'd have the march. Then you'd have the Rose dinner and youth dinner that night after the march. And then you'd have a full day of the youth conference the next day. And I remember by Sunday or Saturday, when I would go back home, just absolutely exhausted. But it was such a good feeling. And we would always have so many people. We'd have like 1,200 kids at the youth conference and really good speakers. And I definitely do miss it for sure. And I hope that it grows, because I do think that, originally when we started Right Now, I was like, oh, what's the point of these rallies and stuff? But I think it's important for just morale, just to know that you're not alone, and just to have that day of, you have your views, and you're very staunch in them, but just to maybe learn a little bit more information or be amped up about it is really important, because if you're not around it all the time, you're not talking to people who are pro-life all the time, it kind of can die. And I even met a guy who at the Alberta March for Life who said as much. He said, I'm the president of my EDA in Edmonton. And, I really care about this issue, but it just falls to the back burner. Like all these other issues come forward. So it's really good for me to be here at the march. And I was glad that he was. So yeah, the Alberta March for Life, I can't tell you how many people. I would say, I don't know. I'm so bad at guessing, and they never even told. But they do cover like a good significant portion of the part of the legislature that we're in. I don't know, like how many did you say in Ottawa? 5,000?
I would say about 5,000 in Ottawa this year.
Yeah, maybe I guess a little bit less than that. But there's a lot of
that many people in Edmonton.
Right? I don't know. I'll post a picture and you guys can count the heads. I'm so bad at guesstimating. But it's very, very, like the Alberta March for Life, it's very religious. It's basically like 99% religious. They just have different people from different religious backgrounds speak. So they had like somebody from the Knights of Columbus and the CWL. They had the bishop. Then they had an imam, and they had
I was going to say at the beginning, those are all the same background.
And then they had like a Sikh guy come and speak, and then they had like Josh Seneca's dad come speak, Pastor Seneca speak, and they had different people from different Protestant denominations. So and then they did have there were about 7 or 8 MLAs that showed up, and Dan Williams is always the token MLA who speaks. But it was good to see them, and we took their picture. It was good for them to be there, and they were pointed out. So that was really positive as well. Like, I feel like there was more MLAs that showed up to the March for Life in Alberta than there were MPs in Ottawa. So that they're more...
only 2 spoke, Kathy Wangenthal and Arnold Viersen.
But I mean, back when I organized it, there would just be a whole row, like rows and rows of MPs that would come up on the stage, and maybe they wouldn't all speak, but a lot of them would, and that was the best part of it, in my opinion. Their message to the crowd, and that's what the crowd really wanted to hear. And I remember, what was the senator's name who had the son with Down syndrome? He actually passed away, but he would always come up.
Was it Senator O? He was he Filipino?
Yeah. I can't remember his name.
We'll have to look that up. Producer Dave can help us with that, yeah.
But he would bring up his son, and everyone would just scream and cheer, and the guy would get so excited, and it was just awesome too. And people would bring up their families, and the kids would love it. And I hope that they do bring that back, and MPs do go out, because that is what pro-life Canadians need to see. And I think that's also what the MPs need to see from pro-life Canadians. They need to be cheered, and they need to be heard from as well. So I hope that gets back, that comes back to the Ottawa March for Life. But yeah, overall in Alberta, it was good. Elvita King was the speaker. There were like maybe 8 counter protesters with an NDP MLA, Janice Irwin, who is always
okay. So did you notice this as well, that the number of counter protesters was significantly down? Because in Ottawa, they had a big pen for them off to the side, and there were maybe 20, and in some ways it's both good and bad. It's good because I was like, oh well, maybe they can't round up as many counter protesters as they could in the past, or maybe there aren't as many available because there aren't as many people there that extreme pro-abortion, because they all sit in the Liberal caucus or full-time staffers for the OLO. But at the same time, it kind of is it concerns me a little bit because maybe they feel like they don't have to come
Yeah.
out because they have the issue so nailed down for them, which would be a mistake on their part.
Yeah.
So I'm curious
I
as
don't
to
think
what
it's
it
that
is.
because, I mean, in Alberta, yeah, I just think that, and these people are far beyond, I would say they're far, far, far beyond abortion advocates. Like, it's basically like a gay pride protest, which I will never understand. But a lot of these signs aren't even about abortion. So I'm like, are you at the right place? Lots of like trans flags and rainbow flags and stuff, which I like, whatever. But yeah, just nothing to do with the actual life issue. So it's kind of weird. And Janice Irwin always holds this sign that says, I can't believe I still have to protest this SHIT. And I just feel like it's so distasteful for a politician. And also, this particular year, when they sang the national anthem, the protesters screamed and played their music over it the whole time, which just as a politician, right? Like you're representing the people of your province, your country, and it's just so disrespectful to be standing with a crowd that's doing that. And then also, while Alveda King was speaking, who is Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece, just like screaming at her, hollering at her, like just that was when they were the most loud. And it just reminded me, like, I was just thinking of what Martin Luther King Jr. had to put up with and
Yeah.
how it's just like history is, is happening all over
Repeating
again,
itself.
repeating itself, right? So, and so anyway, then it was the second time they did some sort of a rose dinner, and the person one of the organizers, Father Dean Dowell, I talked to him and he said it was like twice as big as last year and it's only growing. And so
Good.
Alveda King spoke at that too. I have a funny personal story of I wasn't able to stay for Alveda King because I was supposed to go to the march with a friend of mine. And so her husband drops her off in the morning, pulls her up in the truck. I'm busy loading up the car and I just hear the truck door open. I hear crash and then I hear a scream. So my friend fell out of the truck and was like, and holding her ankle. And she thought she had broken her ankle getting out of the truck. So her husband comes around to me and says, which is the nearest hospital? And I said, Foothills. And they drove off to the hospital. So I had to go to the march by myself with the baby because we were gonna kind of help each other, spell each other off because she has a baby, but she's one, so it would just have been easier with two of us. So with just me and a less than 2 month old, it was difficult. And at that time when the dinner is like the 6-7 mark, like hour mark, PM mark, I mean, that's the witching hour for my kids. So it was just everybody loved him at the dinner and everyone was talking to me and like it's a really good icebreaker if you don't know anybody, but I had to leave when the talk started. So yeah, but it was a good experience. And I'm, might get more involved in the future just because I do have that experience and would like to see it grow here in Alberta for sure.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
No, that's great to hear. You know who would really hate these stories we're talking about growing national and provincial marches for life is Dr. Ellen Wiebe.
That is correct. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't even know if we've mentioned Dr. Ellen Wiebe on this podcast before, but she's a very infamous abortionist here in Canada. She's in Vancouver, I believe, or in the greater
Yep.
Vancouver area. And she's crossed over in the last few years to do assisted suicide deaths. And so BBC did a documentary recently, and the woman who kind of created it and started it was this actress named Liz Carr, and she became disabled as a child. She has a rare genetic disease. And so she's very passionate about assisted suicide because of its effect on the disabled community. So she did this documentary, which did air on BBC. And a big chunk of the documentary was her coming to Canada, of course, and interviewing different people in Canada. She interviewed somebody who had applied for assisted suicide. And then she also interviewed Dr. Ellen Wiebe and went to her clinic and talked to her. And, Liz Carr is this very small, demure lady, has different facial sort of marks on her face. Like it's not very aggressive looking in any way. Very sweet and kind. You can tell as she's talking, she's not deflammatory or trying to, it's not like you're watching Matt Walsh. Not even that Matt Walsh did that in his documentaries, but it's not that kind of attitude. It's a very kind of passive way of asking questions. And just, did you watch the clip with Ellen Wiebe, Scott?
Oh, yeah.
It was there's so many wild things that she said. So creepy from start to finish. Yeah. But here's just a short clip of what happened during that interview.
And then there are people who don't feel comfortable dying at home. For example, they don't want their spouse to have to deal with their memory of them dying in their home. So then they come here, and this is a recliner. And so people recline here, and they can snuggle up with their loved ones if they want. And so it's a good place for some people. Mm-hmm.
How many maid deaths have you been involved with?
Over 400.
That sounds like a lot. Is that what you do now? Is that
No, I still run a contraception and abortion clinic in addition to my maid work.
Would you ever say no?
Of course, I have. Oh, yes. I mean, we have a law, and I obey this law. And so there are people who are not eligible under the law. Now, there are the situations where I might find somebody not eligible or eligible when another person won't because of the way our law is written. I look at it and think, what you really needed was some more drugs, but you want my drugs, I'll give them to you. I've certainly met people who are no more disabled than I am, saying that life is not acceptable in this state. I love my job. I've always loved being a doctor, but, and I delivered over 1,000 babies, and I took care of, families. But this is the very best work I've ever done in the last 7 years.
So as you can see, it was just, she loves killing people. It's her favorite part of the job. Her main, her main career is an abortionist, but she's done over 400 assisted suicide deaths. And she definitely does follow the law. But if another doctor says no to assisted suicide, she would potentially say yes. So
she did say that she said no to people.
Yeah.
But I wonder if people means persons. I wonder how many people she has said no to, and what the reasoning would be. I'm also very, very curious.
What the whole thing, there was a lot of kind of poignant things that stuck up to me, but the main thing was when she said, yeah, these people, they come and they ask for assisted suicide or whatever made. They want to have autonomy and control over their own bodies. I know that they just maybe need some more drugs, but they want the drugs that I offer them that will kill them. And it's like, so that they just need medication or whatever, but you still kill them instead. Like that, she acknowledges and accepts that. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, so in addition to her being an abortionist for decades, she's one of the co-founders of Dying with Dignity Canada, which is the lobby group that has lobbied for now decades to have basically unfettered assisted suicide. I don't think they've come out against expanding assisted suicide for infants and children, like minors, but I'm pretty sure they haven't come out against it and maybe even gone and spoken in favor of it. She is a co-founder of the Canadian Association of Maid Assessors and Providers, which is pretty terrifying in and of itself. She stopped a few years being a general practitioner, and now she only focuses on two things, which are being an abortionist and providing assisted suicide. So she goes into people's homes to provide assisted suicide because, as you see in the clip, that she says that she people are more comfortable dying in their homes, or they can just come in and sit on the lazy boy chair as she injects them with poison right in her office, right where she is and right where her desk is, like literally, like, I mean, you see it in the
I
video,
know.
right? Like it's right there, which is just super super creepy.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
it
And
was
then when she
interesting.
says,
I don't know if you
she said, I've delivered over like 1,000 babies, but the best part of my job is killing
yeah
people.
yeah
Like, what?
yeah it was really interesting in the clips, that Liz Carr says, like, oh, like, are you not concerned a little bit about you know like having assisted suicide and opening this up, like it could increase the risk of those who are more vulnerable, who are susceptible to this, to succumb to assisted suicide. And I think what Liz Carr was getting at is, that there might be undue pressures from the outside, whether it be healthcare professionals, unfortunately family members, people such as this saying, like, oh, you're a drain on the system, why don't you go and kill yourself or have someone kill you for yourself? And as she's asking that question, which obviously is a super super relevant and thoughtful question, you could almost see Dr. Weeb like roll her eyes back and be like, oh no, I have to like discuss this again. Like she's just like visibly annoyed
Yeah.
by the lady in the wheelchair who's
And-
saying,
Yeah.
maybe people who are in a similar condition as me would be more susceptible to choosing this when it's not necessary, which you said she already said that a lot of cases that is the case.
Yeah.
So
And then, like, at
Um,
one point, she says, like, she has, like, a Kamala Harris laugh. She's like,
Yeah.
oh, Liz, you could get a disease at any time. Ha 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 ha.
you could get cancer. Yeah.
And she laughs for, like, a very uncomfortable amount of time. Like, she was really wanting it to happen in that moment.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
it was just
very
it's
boisterous.
very
Yeah.
bizarre. Yeah. But I
So
guess
it's interesting that, like, what it said to me, it's interesting that first off, like, I know people in the United Kingdom complain, and oftentimes rightfully so, about the BBC, but you would never see that type of
Yeah.
documentary from the CBC here. So that's interesting. Number two, that a publicly funded broadcaster is doing a good type of work. So that's number one. Number two, that they would come to Canada and spend so much time
Yeah.
here. And number three, that I think, like, so when I was up in Ottawa and we're having meetings with pro-life members of parliament, and they're discussing with us, the work that they're doing, and they are doing good work to push against the expansion that the Liberals want for the criteria for assisted suicide in Canada. I had proposed to those MPs saying, listen, like, I don't have the stats on this, but I'm pretty sure if you guys pooled some money together and got a polling firm to find stats on this, I'm pretty sure you would find this. I'm quite convinced that there are people who supported assisted suicide in Canada when it was first introduced like 10 years ago, thinking like, okay, I'm going to support this because my 92-year-old grandfather who has, pancreatic cancer, and he's going to die anyway in 3 months. Let's just, inject the poison now, which of course I'm still against for a whole variety of reasons. Like, I'm a big believer in palliative care. One of the big reasons is because it opens up to that situation to be ripe for abuse, which is happening right now. I bet you that person that held that position 10 years ago in 2014 has seen that abuse happen over the last 10 years and would now say, I'm not saying a majority of them would switch, but I'm saying like probably a not insignificant minority at the very least would now say, you know what? This has gone way off the rails. Let's just get rid of this. And that 92-year-old grandfather of mine who's going to die in 3 months anyway, let's make that as least painful and as comfortable as possible for him for the next 3 months, because it's not worth, the homeless, veterans that can't get help, people who are having a bit of a down day or a bit of a down week. It's not worth. Young people from Indigenous communities, which they've been trying to fight the suicide rates up in the Northern Reserves, in the Northern Prairies, Northern Ontario, and of course in the Territories for decades, for the last over the last number of decades, which is a good thing to do. Like, I bet you that person would say, no, like now I'm completely against this. And so I said to these pro-life MPs, don't just push for, we're not going to expand the criteria for assisted suicide, roll it back. Like, now is the time to roll it back. And I bet you going into the next election in 2025, that's going to be a big differentiator between the Liberals and the Conservatives. You even probably would have some of the NDP on board with the policy of saying, you know what, we're going to roll it back significantly, if not just outright eliminate it completely.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you said about the one part because about public opinion, because one part of the documentary, she said, Liz Carr says that she was on a busy bridge in central London, and she asks people passing by, if you saw someone on a bridge about to jump, would you support them in the name of choice? No, you'd probably intervene. But if it was a disabled person, would your response be the same, or would you see it as understandable? You could even go even farther in asking, like, if you saw a person wanting to jump off the bridge, would you intervene? But if you came across a person who had just applied for, assisted suicide because they had autism, would you intervene or would you not? Probably not. You would. So there is a double standard there, and just because they're not actually jumping off a bridge and getting injected and poisoned, at the end of the day, the end result is the same. So, how is it affecting vulnerable people, and what are we going to do about it? Is the ultimate question. And I'm glad that she asked that, and she was talking to people passing by and kind of making that point as well.
If the Conservatives actually want to do something in the next Parliament on the issue, like something significant besides, hey, we're not going to expand it to those with mental health challenges, she'd be an excellent person for them to bring in as a witness to the committee for whatever legislation they would put forward that would, of course, have to go to the committee.
Yeah, and she is an actress and a comedian, and apparently in the reviews they said there was some really funny parts, which, I mean, it's hard to make this issue funny, but just that she's really witty, and so even though I've just watched the L&B part, I'm going to go back later this week and watch the full documentary. It's on BBC, so yeah, maybe we could report back on that. When you were talking about your wife, though, I don't know, I was like getting a little bit weary about how you were going to talk about her and the sacrifices she was making, because she's just a lowly, well, I guess she just got a job, but she was just a lowly homemaker, and that's super offensive, Scott, because you were starting to sound like Harrison Butker, and that's the number one thing you're not supposed to do right now. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, there's Kansas City. What is the place kicker? That's the proper. So he's the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's 28 years old. He's a Catholic, and he spoke at a Catholic university at their commencements. He spoke doing his commencement speech.
Good thing you're not doing a commencement speech.
What?
I said, good thing you're not doing a commencement speech right now.
And I can't even say the word commencement. He did a commencement speech at a Catholic university in Kansas, and it blew up and went viral because people were isolating certain parts of his speech and making him sound like he's this misogynistic, old school, crazy person. The National Catholic Register has posted the full transcript of the speech, and you can also watch it online. But he openly says throughout the speech that he is an active member of his traditional Latin Mass church. And it was in this college. I don't know much about it, but it reminded me, it seemed like it was sort of like Our Lady's of Wisdom, like a small Catholic college.
But it's like Franciscan in that it used to be a lot more heterodox. And then the nuns that were the Order of Benedictine nuns that were instrumental in getting Benedictine College started are no longer associated with the college officially, because, of course, they're the type of order, not the Benedictines overall, of course, of the Order of St. Benedict, but this particular house of nuns, this particular abbey, if you will, are really trying to, speaking about assisted suicide, euthanize their order. They have no young vocations, and they're all well over the age of 65, and they do all these weird things from the 60s in 2024. So it's a lot more like Franciscan, because Franciscan University in Steubenville used to be like that, and then the Orthodox took it over and saved it. Whereas, Our Lady's of Wisdom was founded always as an Orthodox institution.
Yeah, so here's just a small clip that's been circulating. We'll just play it for you.
For the ladies present today, Congratulations on an amazing accomplishment. You should be proud of all that you have achieved to this point in your young lives. I want to speak directly to you briefly because I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now, about to cross this stage, and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today and able to be the man I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker.
Okay, so he basically has a message for women during that speech, basically saying that society has told you one thing, to put career above everything else, and that if you asked his wife, what her true calling was, it was to be a homemaker. And in a different part of the speech, or maybe it was right before or right after, I can't remember, but she was talking about his successes, and he was visibly getting emotional because he was saying that everything that he's done, he owes to his wife. So please explain to me how that's misogynistic. I have no idea. Every woman I think would be so excited to have a husband who actually got emotional thinking about them that way and appreciating all the work that they do. But yeah, this just absolutely set off the left like you wouldn't believe. It's highly amusing. And also
Sorry, go ahead.
And also very, very sad because he is actually able to say it out loud. But when you actually talk to women who have put career over children, maybe they've frozen their eggs or whatever, then they become in their late 30s or early 40s. They want to have their children now, but they can't. That is to me the ultimate greatest sadness that a woman can endure because it's too late and you've gone your whole life working for the man, making other people rich and not prioritizing your own self and your own family, thinking that you are. And then when you've realized it, it's too late. And to me, that's incredibly sad. And the people who need to hear this the most are young people who are starting out in that trajectory.
Yeah, and it's okay. So there are many facets to it, and to be honest, I didn't watch his commencement speech until today. I heard about it. I've known about Harrison Butker for quite some time. Obviously, aside from just being the place kicker punter for the Kansas City Chiefs, Father Zolstorf, who has a blog that's been going for a number of years. So anyone who's interested, not just Catholics, if you want to get good actual Orthodox commentary on all things. What does a prayer really say? His blog is excellent for that, and so he's mentioned him for the last couple of years because he would serve at his Extraordinary Reformed community at his parish, usually in the I don't think he is the master of ceremonies. I think it's usually a thurifer. But anyway, his commencement speech was really interesting because if you watch the whole speech, he talks about vocations, right, which makes sense for a commencement speech at a Catholic college. So it's not he wasn't just talking to women and only women.
No,
he was talking about young men who are called to the priesthood. In fact, most of the speech was about that. He was talking about women who are graduating, who are convocating that day, the men as well as men and women who might be called to the religious life. So, of course, as Catholics, as well as Orthodox and some other Protestants, you have a variety of vocations, states of life, if you will, for your life, whether you're as a man called to the priesthood, called to the married state, which, of course, you are with your husband, Alissa, and I am with my wife, and then the religious life. And so he was talking about all those aspects. And one thing, I just had a couple quotes in there, and one thing he said, his wife made sure that his football career and the side businesses that he has, which I believe is mostly real estate, did not distract him from being a father and a husband. I thought that was really important because I think it goes both ways to make sure that your spouse, and of course, I'm not speaking with years and years of experience of being married, but that you're not a workaholic. I think that goes both ways. That if your wife does work outside the home or is predominantly or entirely just inside the home, that she's not working all the time. And same that goes for your husband, that you have to be there for your children, to actually play with your children, to spend some time with your spouse. One thing that my wife and I always try to do, and you're not always successful with this, is at least once a week, usually on Sunday evenings, we put the kids to bed, the house is clean and whatever. And it's also Sunday, so we're not doing a ton of housework, or any housework ideally. After we put the kids to bed, just making a couple cool different cocktails and just sitting down and turning on some music and just talking, just chatting, like an in-house kind of date type of thing. So when he said that about his wife, that really made me think of what we tried to do. And when he spoke to men, for the part when he's speaking to men, he said one of the greatest lies that young men have been told, that it's not necessary for us to be in the home or in our communities. And so he's talking about the absentee rate, the absentee father rate in the United States, which is one of the highest in the world. He believes that correlates quite closely with the very high rate of violence that they have in the United States, not just in the home but outside the home as well. Um, going and listening to his whole commencement speech, I thought was not only, and maybe he didn't intend it to be this way. I thought not only it was a pushback against kind of the cultural Marxism that for the time being is permeating throughout the general culture and in the West, so in North America and Western Europe, though I think that's starting to substantially dissipate. But I also think that it was a push against the red pill community of like your Pearl Davises and your Sneekos and your Andrew Tates that think that they're conservative or portray themselves to be conservative, but actually hold like really extreme actual Marxist views when it comes to marriage and family and love, although that's something that they had basically never talk about and they never use that word. And so I thought his commencement speech, whether he intended it or not, pushed against both. And I think that's really important that both are pushed against, because he's not saying that, wives should only ever be in the home and should never have careers or anything like that. Like, there's none of that in the speech. He was just saying in his experience, and he said, like, I'm not speaking from wisdom, I'm just speaking from experience. My wife says this, and it's really important to her. And she also has an effect on him in that it sounds like either she's had to potentially rein him in from being a workaholic, or maybe reminding him or whatever. And in the red pill community, that would never happen, because wives should never be spoken. They should always be veiled. They're just basically baby making objects. So to me, when I went through it, I thought that's what I kind of got from it. And I thought it was really important to push against both extremes, which actually kind of come together, oddly enough, in the end.
Yeah, I mean, so I had my own like weird little personal experience with this speech, because I was just cruising on TikTok this a few days ago, and there was this woman, and I don't know who she is, just she had had like 200,000 followers or something, and she had made this video about she was like, oh, I have update on Harrison Butker, and she went on his website and she's like, this specific part was taken down on his website, and then his talent agent had this company like TELUS that he worked with, and so I emailed TELUS, and she's like, do you have affiliations with Harrison Butker? And then they responded like, we don't talk about our contracts and whatever. So it was just like this really weird doxing / amateur sleuthing that really made no sense, that got her nowhere. But tens of thousands of people were liking it and commenting and stuff, and it was like one of the, after 10 or 20 videos of seeing this stuff, I commented on it. And all I put was, you need a hobby. Because if you look at the amount of work that she did just to get no response from TELUS and get really nowhere, it probably took a long time. And within 3 minutes, because in TikTok, if you have a comment, you can take that comment and reply to it in video form, and then that's another TikTok.
Right.
So within 3 minutes, she had responded to my to my comment, and so that all these like trolls were coming on my coming at me and on my videos and stuff, and it was really almost amusing because they were the way that they portray his speech was like he was saying, because they would say like, did your husband allow you to post that? Shouldn't you be in the kitchen? Like all this stuff, when clearly I work a full-time job. I co-founded an organization. Like I talk about that openly and in my videos. I'm a mom and that kind of thing. So then I posted a TikTok of all the women on Twitter, because there was a thread that was started of all these women who supported his speech, who were career women, scientists, whatever, and that they stopped their careers or they coexist with their careers by being a mother and a homemaker, which is what I would say I am. Like I work full time, but I would also say that I'm a mother and a homemaker to a certain, like a homemaker to a certain extent, not a mother to a certain extent. and I think in my situation it's a little bit different, just because I'm working for a not-for-profit for a cause that I really believe in, and I'm sort of like pushing for societal change and that kind of thing. I think I would think very differently about working if I was working, for a company or on Bay Street or some kind of corporate job, because I do think that I should be at home with my family and I should be raising my children. We know what happens when you don't raise your children and you send them to be raised by the public system. It doesn't turn out very well. And I think that's a very important role for mothers and for fathers. So if somebody, to balance those duties and to have the children being taken care of by their parents. And I know that's not a luxury that everybody can have, but if everybody kind of followed that template, I think it would be more of a luxury that people could have. I have family members of my own women in my own family who are doctors and pharmacists and things like that. And when it's time for them to go off maternity leave, they don't go. They're just like, I'm staying home now. Like they just don't go back to work because they don't want to. And it's not fulfilling to them. And they realize that this was fulfilling. And these aren't like secular people. These are people who, do have this traditional form of thinking with the traditional family. And it's just an objective reality that being home with your family is so much greater and so much more rewarding than going to a job and making somebody else rich, because that's ultimately what most jobs are. Like if I go to work for TELUS, I'm getting my own salary, but I'm also like making the TELUS executive so much more rich through my job. And you can bet your ass that a lot of those people are men. So it's just funny how it like comes full circle. And it's a very sad reality for women to think. And like I said, I think there's no greater sadness than wanting a family and not doing what you needed to do when you could in your life to achieve that goal, and then realizing it but when it's too late. So that happens all too often. So I'm glad that he's saying the speech and that we are talking about it. And I'm, as much as there was hate, Bill Maher was a firm defender of the speech. So that's good. Like some sort of classical lefties were defending it. And I'm glad the conversation is happening. And it's not just like this one-sided, he's evil kind of situation. Because even the owner of the Kansas City Chiefs, his wife came out kind of defending him and saying that she values her role as a mother and a homemaker and things like that. So it's good to see people starting to speak out a little bit.
Can you show everyone on camera the piece of paper with all the words on it that you just said that your husband Aaron wrote for you to say on this issue? There, there we go. Yeah, no, it was great to see, and I figured it wouldn't be as bad. Well, it's not bad. I figured it wouldn't be the way it was being portrayed, and I'm glad that I listened to it. And he had a lot of good things to say, not just toward women, but men as well, and for those contemplating discerning a vocation to the holy priesthood as well as to the religious life. So, good commencement speech.
Yeah, and it's also like the guy isn't a pundit. He doesn't work for a conservative think tank, or he's not trying to be famous by saying these conservative things. He's a professional, like he plays for a professional NFL team, and he says, that's not what he wants to do, is speak out about these things, but he was put in this position that he feels that, he's called to do, and he didn't even want to do that commencement speech, but he was kind of persuaded to do it. And if he was going to do it, he was going to do it right, kind of thing, which I also find admirable. Like, it's not something that he's saying to become famous or to kind of antagonize people. He's saying it because he believes it from the bottom of his heart, and because there's a lot of truth to what he's saying as well. So, and it doesn't help him in any way. It doesn't further his career. It makes his life probably more difficult. Like, I'm sure Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are just not too impressed with him and their speech, because Taylor Swift is kind of following in that trajectory. But anyway, it's probably very difficult.
I don't know. Maybe they're sitting there and they're like, yeah, you know what? He's got some points.
Hopefully, that would be awesome. But somehow I doubt it.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larosmedia.com
and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
Okay, so our last topic is about Trudeau, of course, because we can't go, a couple podcasts without talking about Trudeau. And he was at a news conference in New Brunswick last week, and of course he decided to go after the provincial government. And he went after them on climate change and the trans stuff, but he also specifically went on and on about women's rights and the right to choose. So he said that he would help the New Brunswick Liberals campaign ahead of the provincial election, which will be held by October. He said that Higgs doesn't respect a woman's right to choose, and that the unwillingness to engage in allowing women to actually choose what happens to their future and their bodies is a disgrace. And he said, I will continue to call out governments of New Brunswick and any conservative leader who continue to go after women's rights. He also brought up this U.S. Supreme Court decision saying that Canada could suffer similar restrictions if conservatives are in power. Restrictions on abortion, Trudeau said, are more likely to happen in Canada, particularly with conservative leaders who continue to not stand up for women's rights. So, a lot to unpack there, both politically and just in terms of abortion. But the one thing that kind of struck me is that if Trudeau thinks that it's going to help the New Brunswick Liberals to campaign, I don't think that he's fully aware of his ratings right now and his polling numbers.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the provincial Liberals in New Brunswick are also against a carbon tax. So that's how he answered the reporter's question first, was to discuss about carbon tax. So that was interesting. On the Trans for Kids issue, this is a new line that he's trotted out, which I find very interesting. And he said, I trust parents, I trust the schools, which is very, very interesting to me. So they obviously internally recognize, that's the Liberal Party of Canada, of course, that he can't turn against parents. But it's also interesting that he's also saying, I trust the public school system. And he's trying to tie the both together. So I thought that was interesting, and I'm kind of curious as to where that goes in the future. And he called minors who are wanting to seek what they would call gender affirming care and surgery, so basically castration, that they're the most vulnerable of all the vulnerable children. The abortion stuff I also found to be really interesting as well. So it's the one of the three issues that he listed: the carbon tax, the trans issue, and then abortion. It seems to be the one that he's the most passionate about. And I'm wondering, because you look across Canada and you see obviously the big change on the carbon tax, right? That that the federal Conservatives, at least for the last like 2 years, have been really, really pushing. Of course, that'd be very passionate to someone like Pierre Poilievre, who owes his leadership more or less to Aaron O'Toole, who in April of 2021 decided that the Conservative Party of Canada was officially going to be in favor of a carbon tax, or a carbon tax of sorts. Remember, you get like your points and you get to choose things from a catalog or something like that. Um, so like we've seen the public shift away from carbon taxes, and of course I think that's more tied to inflation than anything else. Funnily enough, basically in Manitoba, we essentially don't have a carbon tax, and yeah, we pay a little bit less in gas. So when I was in Ontario, gas was like $1.63 a liter, and here it's like $1.37, still $1.37. Like, it's, even though there's basically no carbon tax, it's still quite expensive. It doesn't fix everything, though I am happy to see it gone here. Um, but I find that a lot of right-wing political parties and thought leaders, or whatever you want to call it in Canada, while they've moved on those other issues, and sorry, and sorry, the trans for kids issue as well. Of course, we saw big explosions of protesters back in the autumn and this time last year, and we've seen what's happened in places like New Brunswick, which is really the tip of the spear for this type of stuff, and places like the previous government, briefly in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, of course, Alberta, and now we're seeing a provincial Conservative Party in British Columbia that's on the verge of winning a majority government this October. That's very, very hard against the woke ideology that's being pushed in high schools and middle schools and elementary schools on this specific issue of gender ideology. But it's still basically dead silence on abortion. And I wonder what you think about this, Alissa. I wonder if that is why he is so passionate on that issue, because it's the one issue kind of remaining in the social issues, not the carbon tax, really social issue, that leaders of right-wing political parties are still substantially off base with the base of those parties that vote for them, that volunteer for them, that donate money to them.
Yeah,
That's what I got from that clip.
Yeah, if I were Trudeau, I would be doing the exact same thing. It's very, very smart politically because of how dumb politically conservatives are on this issue. I would absolutely go after the abortion issue because you're going to be met with absolute silence. And you're also going, at the same time, like you said, going to disengage a lot of conservative voters and volunteers and donors. So it's the most wise thing that you could possibly do. And I am still waiting for the day after, 14 years of working in the pro-life movement to hear an actual legitimate response from the Conservative Party on this issue, because clearly what they're doing is terrible. And at the same time that they're saying, how desperate is Trudeau is by bringing up this issue, they're just playing into his hand. Like, that's exactly what Trudeau wants them to say, and they keep saying it, not learning from their mistakes over and over and over again. So hopefully, at some point, maybe they'll get a different talking point, and they won't just harp on this we won't reopen the abortion debate over and over and over again, because clearly that isn't working. And yeah, he was the last conservative leader to get a majority, so just because of that doesn't mean that you need to keep saying that talking point, and clearly it's not working anymore.
Well, and now they've gone beyond that, right? So now Anna Poilievre, which is Pierre's wife, has gone publicly in the media in Quebec and saying, not only do they hold to the Harper position, but she's, passionately pro-abortion. Sabrina Maddow, who was up until recently running for a Conservative nomination in Aurora, Oak Ridge, Richmond Hill, writes in the National Post as a Conservative commentator that Justin Trudeau isn't pro-abortion enough. So yeah, this is an issue for the Conservative Party. One thing I brought up, and not just the federal Conservative Party, too, by the way, this also affects right-wing political parties provincially as well. One issue I brought up to the pro-life members of Parliament in our meetings on Parliament Hill a few weeks ago when I was there, the day before the March for Life, the National March for Life that is in Ottawa that Thursday. I said to them, the Conservatives right now are currently spoiled with Justin Trudeau. And I mean at this particular point in time, because 18 months from now in the election of October 2025, it could be different. It could not be a 20-point lead for the Conservative Party of Canada. It could be a whatever point lead for the Liberal Party of Canada. We don't know. I mean, the likelihood is, not super high, but 18 months is a very long time. They say a week is an eternity in politics. Well, what is that? That's 18 months times 4. So, you're talking about several dozens of weeks, several dozens of political eternities between now and election day. So, as I was saying to them, whether the Liberals win the next election or not, there's probably going to be a leadership race within the Liberal Party of Canada. And if we, right now, do our job, the next leader of the Liberal Party, at the very least, is going to say, I'm getting rid of the practice that Justin Trudeau had of saying that if you're pro-life and you run for a Liberal nomination and you win that nomination, I'm going to instruct the executive director of the party to not sign your nomination papers, which is required in order to be an actual registered candidate of Elections Canada for a registered political party. If we have a Liberal leader that replaces Justin Trudeau, which the replacement is going to come a couple of years after the next election, whether Justin wins that election or not, and if we do our job properly and that new Liberal leader says, I'm not going to do that, and if you are pro-life and you run one for a Liberal nomination, you win the nomination, and you want to put forward and vote for pro-life legislation, and I'm not going to punish you for that, that is a really, really big game changer. And if you can even conceive this beyond that, what if you have the next leader of the Liberal Party of Canada going into the election in 2029 when all of these economic issues and housing issues are still going to be there? Because guess what? Getting rid of Justin Trudeau and getting rid of the carbon tax doesn't magically make all these issues go away. Sure, it helps, but it's a drop in the bucket. All those issues are still going to be there. And now they're going to be put on the shoulders of Pierre Poilievre and not Justin Trudeau because he's gone. What if you have a Liberal leader that not only allows pro-lifers to basically, as a conservative position today of the Conservative Party of Canada, you can run for us, you can put forward legislation, you can vote for it, but we're not going to do anything about it as a cabinet. What if you have a Liberal leader that goes beyond that and says, actually, you know what? I think our party is going to be against sex-selective abortion, late-term abortion, whatever. That's going to be a huge game changer. So I think that the Conservative Party of Canada right now, to me, it seems like their official ideology is just like anti-Justin, and they're not actually thinking through the issues. And if at this point, when you have such a pro-abortion leader, you're not exercising that and creating that muscle memory, if you will, of rhetorically going against the extreme position of Justin Trudeau on the issue of abortion, you won't always have that diametric opposite of you, and you could have a pro-life Liberal leader going into the election in 2029 potentially putting forward more pro-life policy than the Conservative Party of Canada. And a lot of the pro-life MPs I put that to a few weeks ago in Ottawa, all of which of course were Conservative at this meeting, were very uncomfortable with that proposition. But they really should start thinking about it, because we at Right Now and pro-lifers watching this podcast should really think about that, because there's going to be an opportunity to finally elect pro-life Liberals, for example, in places that the Conservatives will never win, like the island of Montreal, like downtown Vancouver, and it's to build up toward that pro-life majority in the House of Commons.
Even if that does happen, which I cannot imagine happening, I mean, maybe they won't be as staunch as Trudeau, but I don't imagine they would be even remotely pro-life. But even if, say, they were open to pro-lifers running for the party or something, to me, the result of that in the Conservative Party would just be pushing the Overton window, sort of like the PPC does. So if they're moving over on that issue, I think the Conservatives will just naturally and automatically move over on that issue. Like, I don't think they will stand firm. For example, like when the PPC ran in your Manitoba riding there, like the minute that there was another party saying, PPC saying there should be late-term abortion restrictions or whatever, you had Brendan Leslie say like, oh, I'm pro-life and I'm against assisted suicide, and like not just say it, but actually like say it passionately in speeches and in the media and things like that. So I just imagine that that's what would naturally happen. So I think it's definitely a good thing regardless. But I just wish it wouldn't take the PPC or the Liberal Party forcing the Conservatives to move in that direction, and that they would just automatically do it because it's politically wise and it's what the majority of the caucus wants.
Yeah, if there's anything I've learned in the 7 years or however long, actually it's closer to 8 years. Yeah, it's 8 years now that we've been doing this for Alyssa. Is that when it comes to particularly conservative politicians, fear is always a good tactic. So
For all
if they're scared of
politicians.
yeah, if they're scared of losing to liberals or losing their nomination or
Yeah.
whatever. So as long as we have the numbers, they'll move in the right direction. But yeah, that's what Justin Trudeau being so passionate about the abortion issue really reminded me of. And it like I'm sure, and when we should end this soon because we got to talk about hockey real quick. But did you see the creepy video that Justin Trudeau had when he's talking about contraception with that young woman on the couch? Yeah. And of course, in their minds, contraception isn't just, contraception. It includes abortifacients,
Yeah.
which actually produces an abortion. So conception has already happened. And I'm thinking like, what it like if you had a Conservative Party of Canada that was not terrified to talk about anything beyond, the carbon tax, what a great opportunity to really showcase that video because it's just creepy and uncomfortable. But of
Super
course, he could
creepy.
get away and do it because he knows that there's going to be no pushback whatsoever on it.
Yeah, it's really funny too that at near the end of the video, the interviewer, the lady, kind of shifts her body backwards,
Yeah,
like away
yeah.
from him. Like even just gutturally, she knows I need to move back away from this person. So, yeah, if you haven't, it's on his Twitter and probably on Facebook as well, so you can check that out. But I'm sure that we're going to get to the part where all of our listeners want to hear about our thoughts on hockey, so we definitely can't
Yes.
leave without that. But
Yes.
condolences.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Are you excited for your new head coach?
I mean, I think just firing and hiring a coach is just sort of a cop out for like, oh, we need something to change. Like, does it actually make a huge difference? Maybe a small bit, but I don't think it makes like a massive difference. I think they need to kind of, make some major trades for it to be a big difference. But yeah, I mean, whatever. There's a funny video. There's an interesting video of Craig and Brendan Shanahan having a fight back in like
Going at it.
90,
Yeah.
87 or
Yeah.
something. Yeah. But
Maybe that's like a future clip of what the executive offices are going to look like when Berube says, "I can't have you spending $45 million on 4 players."
yeah, which hopefully they don't in the next season. Like that's already off the table. But I will say though, I am now seriously rooting for Edmonton. I think it's super exciting, and I just like my husband wants to divorce me for saying this, but it's really exciting for an Alberta team to be doing so well. Like I think even people in Calgary, whether or not they're as hardcore as my husband, whether they want to admit it or not, like they're probably like secretly rooting for an Alberta team to win. I think that would be cool. I think it's a long shot, but I'm really hoping that it will happen.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about predictions. I actually have the same prediction for both sides. I have New York and Florida going 4-2, going to New York. New York's had such an easy path
Yeah.
so far, and that team is well poised to win the cup. They have, and it's kind of like I think the window for New York is kind of closing a little bit because some of the players are getting a little bit older. I have a Blake Wheeler is now on their team, and he's scheduled to come back I think later this week or early next week. So if they make it to the cup and then win the cup, Blake Wheeler can finally win a cup and then retire, which would be great to see. But I think there's a lot of people on that team that do deserve to win a cup. I mean, Chris Kreider had that natural hat trick when they beat Carolina 5-3 or 6-3 or 5-2, 6-2, whatever it was in their final game. So I think New York is a lot more well rested than Florida. I think Florida had a really rough series against Boston. I wasn't surprised to see Boston bow out in the second because I thought they were substantially worse than last year. So I think New York's going to take it 4-2 because Florida is young enough and they have young enough guys. I think that they can make a couple of games of it. Dallas and Edmonton, I think Edmonton's going to have a real tough time with Dallas. I think Edmonton has also had a bit of an easy run so far. Like I wouldn't say Vancouver was super easy.
No.
I would not have been surprised if Vancouver beat them, but I think whoever had won between Vegas and Edmonton was going to always have a tough time against Dallas.
Goaltending.
Colorado made mincemeat out of Connor Hellebuck against the number one team in the NHL for allowing the fewest number of goals. And then Colorado goes into Dallas, and then it kind of gets reversed a little bit on Colorado, which just shows how great of a team Dallas is. Ottinger is kind of back to his regular self, and I know that Colorado had the issue of Valeri Nichushkin having go back into player rehab and not be able to play for 6 months. I know that puts a downer on your team, especially when you're already down a game or two in the playoffs. But yeah,
I think
I think
goaltending will be the difference between Dallas and Edmonton. Although,
and Stuart Skinner has not had a great
Yeah.
playoffs either. Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully. I mean, you never know what can happen, but I definitely like my head tells me it'll be Dallas and New York, and New York will win. I
Yeah.
did predict Dallas originally, but now given what I've seen with New York, but what I want to happen is for Edmonton to win both this round and next round, and I think it would be Edmonton and New York. But who knows, right? But
It was kind of been cool if like literally 30 years later it would have been Vancouver and New York, because Vancouver lost to New York in the 1994 Stanley Cup playoff final for the cup. So that kind of would have been a bit of a cool storyline. And it's odd to me that Edmonton and Vancouver have only played each other. This is only the third time they've ever played each other in the playoffs, and they've been pretty much in the same division for a very long time. But then again, when Vancouver was good, Edmonton was bad, and vice versa. I think Edmonton has a bit of a similar issue, like Toronto does. Like, you have a lot of money tied up in very few players, and I think that's gonna show itself against Dallas. Dallas and New York are very similar in that you have a lot of money spread out, kind of like what Vegas was last year. Frankly, I know Colorado has Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar. But they used to be more spread out. They're not as deep as they used to be, but that Dallas team is deep. They got young guys like Logan Stankoven and Robertson, not the guy who plays for, but his brother, right? The Filipino brothers. One plays for Dallas and the other plays for for Toronto. I think it's Nick Robertson, and I can't remember his brother's name. Anyway, it's going to bother me. Anyway, but I wanted to go to, because we weren't able to discuss round two, but I want to go back to round one real quick and just go over our predictions and see how close we were. It wasn't too bad.
Because I think they were like, nobody was upset. So I think like our predictions were like, I didn't give numbers, but you did.
You gave numbers on some of them. So I said, okay, for Toronto, Boston, you said 4-rip for Boston.
It was almost.
Yeah. I said 4-3, and I thought it was going to end in Boston. I did say this, but at the time, because I was looking at the video earlier today, I was like, I thought it would go to overtime as well, which it did. So I was bang on for that one. You said Florida. I said Florida 4-2. That one was 4-1. You said New York. I said Rangers 4-1. That one was a sweep, because he said, do you think anyone was going to sweep? And I said no. And I can't remember the video. I thought, well, if anyone was going to be swept, it would be Washington. I still upset that Washington got in, because like all they really did was like feed Ovechkin the puck. He had like 2 shots on goal over 4 games. Like, why not like a young upstart team like the Red Wings get in and see what they can do against New York?
And the Red Wings just were like fighting for their life at each game. Like
yeah, they had those like 3 overtime wins in a row going down. And yeah. Carolina, the Islanders, I said 4-2. Carolina won 4-1. Colorado, Winnipeg. I said 4-2 for Winnipeg, and you said Winnipeg because you picked the home team. But originally you said Colorado, but Colorado won that one 4-1. That was brutal. Vegas, Dallas, I said 4-2. I didn't think Vegas would do as well as they did. They made that one more interesting. That was 4-3. Edmonton, LA, I said 4-2. You said Edmonton. Edmonton won that one 4-1. And then Dallas, I thought, and Nashville, I thought was going to go 4-3. And they barely won that game that they won 1-0 in game 6. That easily could have gone to a 4-3 game and probably should have. You said Vancouver as well. So overall, I thought we were pretty good. And I think probably most people are where we're at for our prediction for the Stanley Cup final. And I'd have to check Money Puck, but I'm pretty sure that most betting sites and stat site probably have the Rangers winning the cup, or the most likely to win the cup.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely exciting. I only watch the Edmonton games now. But I probably will check both out in the upcoming week.
I thought for a little bit there yesterday that Vancouver was going to come back,
Yeah.
especially because they're playing in their barn, and probably if they had another 5 minutes, they probably could have tied it up and got that to overtime. I had the feeling that if that game was going to go to overtime, Vancouver was going to win it.
Yeah, well, they did it before. Remember, they pulled a Boston and like they were down 4-1 and they won 5-4 that one game. So they definitely could have happened again. Yeah.
But when you only have 12 shots on goal for the first 2 periods,
yeah, slow start.
Probably not going to win the game. Yeah. And how about what is he Slovakian? Is he Czech? Artur let's get his last name wrong because they've had a bunch of. That's the other thing about Vancouver. Like they didn't have Demko. Brock Besser was hurt, and who's their goalie? He was playing out of his mind. Shivas. I can't remember how to pronounce his last name, but anyway.
I wonder where the lady. Remember when Vancouver lost the in the final series, and there was those riots, and that lady stole the pants. I wonder what she was doing last night. Do you remember that viral video of like the lady, like they broke down the glass? Do you know what I'm talking about? She ran into the department store.
Yeah.
She grabbed these pants and ran out, but like everybody was rioting, but for some reason it really all the media coverage after that focused around the pants lady, and she like I'm pretty sure she went to jail and stuff. She must.
That was Boston, right? 2011.
So I wonder.
It was right after.
She probably was just like snug at home, like I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. That Stanley Cup Final Series went to 7 games too, did it not?
Oh,
and it was in Vancouver. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was in Vancouver, and I'm pretty sure they lost 4-1, and it was like such a big letdown game. Like it was Boston had controlled it all the way through.
Hence the riots. Well, thus ends the podcast, and you know the drill. Like and follow us on social media, on YouTube, on Spotify, on Rumble, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Talk to you soon.
Bye for now.